Right, so you've found the house, you've done the exciting bit, the browsing, the viewings, the imagining where the sofa goes, and you've got a number in your head, the asking price. That, you think, is what moving costs, and it isn't, not even close. The asking price is just the headline, but underneath it sits a whole stack of other costs, the fees, the taxes, the professionals, the van, and that quietly adds up to thousands of pounds on top. And here's the problem. Nobody ever hands you a tidy list of them at the start. They arrive one at a time, usually when you're least expecting it and least able to absorb the shock. So that's what this video is, your tidy list up front before any of it catches you out. I'm going to walk you through every real cost of moving house in the UK, roughly what each one runs to, and crucially which ones you can trim and which ones you genuinely can't. By the end of this video, you'll be able to sit down and work out your actual all-in number, not the fantasy one. So a quick word on the figures. Costs vary hugely by where you live, the price of the property, and who you use. So I'll give you the honest typical ranges rather than pretend there's one magic number. Where a number moves around like stamp duty, I'll tell you exactly where to check the live number for your own situation. So let's add it all up. So let's start with the mortgage because that's where the biggest single lump lives, your deposit. Now the deposit isn't really a cost. It's your money becoming equity in your home. You don't lose it, but it's cash you have to have available on the day, so it belongs on the list. Most buyers are putting down somewhere between 5 and 20% of the purchase price. The bigger the deposit, the better the mortgage rates you can get access to. So it does real work beyond just getting you through the door. And then there are the mortgage fees themselves, and this is where people stop reading the small print and get stung. The big one is the lender's arrangement fee, sometimes called a product fee. On some deals, it's zero. On others, it can be £1,000, £1,500 or more. And here's the thing nobody tells you. The cheapest headline rate often carries the biggest fee. A deal that looks absolutely brilliant on the headline rate can be the worst possible deal overall once you fold the fee in. You can usually add that fee to the loan, but then you're paying interest on it for years, so it's rarely free money. There's often a valuation fee too, where the lender checks the house is worth what you're paying. Plenty of lenders throw that in for nothing now, but not all, so do check. And then there's me, the broker. A good mortgage advisor charges a fee. Mine is £495 for a standard mortgage, £795 for a buy-to-let, and £295 for a remortgage. And it's free if you're already a client of mine coming back for your remortgage. And I'll be honest with you about why that fee is worth paying, because it's a fair question. A broker who knows the market can save you many times their fee by putting you with the right lender at the right rate, spotting the deal with a sensible fee rather than a flashy rate, and stopping the whole thing falling over when it wobbles. That's the job. If I don't save you more than I cost you, I'm not doing it right. Now, the one that makes most people wince is stamp duty, properly known as stamp duty land tax, and it's usually the single biggest cost of moving after the deposit itself. Now, here's how it works. In England and Northern Ireland, it's a tax on the purchase price, charged in bands a bit like income tax. You pay nothing on the slice up to a threshold, then a percentage on the next slice, then a higher percentage above that, and so on and so on. So it's not one flat rate on the whole price, it's stepped. And I'm going to be very careful here because these thresholds have changed more than once in the last couple of years. And the last thing I want is you budgeting off an out-of-date number. So rather than have you take my figure as gospel, here's the honest instruction. Go to the government's own stamp duty calculator on gov.uk. Bang in your price and your situation, and it will give you the exact number to the pound in about 30 seconds. It's free and it's the real thing. But let me give you the shape of it so you know exactly what to expect. First-time buyers get a genuine break. You pay nothing up to a generous threshold and then a reduced rate above that. Up to a cap, which is a real leg up worth thousands. Home movers buying your next main home pay the standard banded rates. And if you're buying an additional property, a second home or a buy-to-let, there's a surcharge on top. That's several extra percentage points across the board, which is a serious sum, so factor that in early if it applies to you. And there's one trap here to flag because it catches people out and it's brutal. If you're buying your new home before you sold your old one, even for a short overlap, you can get hit with that additional property surcharge as if it's a second home. You can often claim it back once the old one sells, but you have to find the cash up front. And there's a time limit on the refund. If that's your situation, get advice before exchange, not after. And a quick note for anywhere outside England and Northern Ireland. Scotland has its own version, Land and Buildings Transaction Tax. And Wales has a land transaction tax. Different names, different bands, same idea. Use the right calculator for where the property is that you're buying. So the next thing to look at is the legal work. This is the solicitor or licensed conveyancer who handles the actual transfer of the property from the seller's name into yours. You legally cannot do this bit yourself in practice. So it's an unavoidable cost, but it's one where the price varies a lot, so it pays to compare. The conveyancer's own fee is their charge for the work. This typically runs somewhere in the region of £1,000 to £1,500 for a standard purchase, sometimes more for a leasehold flat because there's extra work involved. If you're selling as well as buying, you'll pay a fee on both sides, so budget for 2 lots. But on top of their fees sit the disbursements, and this is the word that trips people up. Disbursements are costs that your conveyancer pays out on your behalf to third parties and then bills you for. The big ones are the searches, the local authority search, water and drainage, environmental, checking there isn't a motorway planned through the back garden or a history of flooding. And those come to a few £100s. Then there's the land registry fee to register you as a new owner and the bank transfer fees for moving the money around. None of these things are huge on their own, but together they add several £100s to the legal bill. My honest tip here, don't just pick the cheapest quote you see. A conveyancer who is slow or who doesn't pick up the phone can cost you the whole purchase when a chain is under pressure. And I talked about exactly that in another video last week. Cheap and useless is the most expensive option there is. And now for the surveys. This is the one that people are most tempted to skip to save money, and it's often the one that saves them the most. A survey is an independent inspection of the property's condition, separate from the lender's valuation, which only checks that it's worth the loan, not whether the roof is about to fall in. And there are broadly 3 levels. Level 1's the most basic, the condition report. It's fine for a newer conventional home in good nick. Level 2, the home buyer report, is the popular middle option. It's a fuller inspection that flags problems and usually gives you a market valuation too, and typically costs somewhere in the region of around £500 or £600. Level 3, the full building or structural survey, is a thorough one, and it's what you want for an older property. Anything unusual or a place that's clearly had work done, it costs more, often well into 4 figures, but on a Victorian terrace or a quirky conversion, it's money extremely well spent. So here's the way to think about surveys. A survey is not a cost, it's an insurance policy against a much bigger cost. Spending £500 or £600 to discover a £2,000 damp problem, or worse, a £20,000 roof issue before you commit is the best value spend in the whole process. And even when it doesn't find a disaster, a survey that flags a few grand's worth of work is a negotiating tool. You can often go back and ask the seller to knock the cost off the price. I've seen a survey pay for itself many times over in that way. Everything so far has been about buying the property. But if you're a home mover, not a first-time buyer, you've also got a house to sell, and selling has its own bill. A big one is the estate agent's fee. A traditional high street agent usually charges a percentage of the sale price, commonly somewhere around 1 to 1.5% plus VAT, though it is negotiable and it's worth haggling on. Now, on an average home, that's a few £1,000s. There are online and fixed fee agents that charge flat sum instead, often much less, but you typically do more of the legwork yourself, so it's a trade-off between cost and convenience. You'll also need an EPC, or Energy Performance Certificate. In order to market the property, that's a legal requirement to sell. And it's a modest cost, usually under £100 if you don't already have a valid one. And don't forget, you'll be paying conveyancing on the sale as well as the purchase, which I did mention earlier. There's 2 lots of legal fees when you're moving rather than buying your first home. And now for the physical move itself. Removals, yeah, you can do it yourself with a hired van and a lot of favours owed to friends, which is cheap but exhausting. Or you can pay a professional firm, which can run to a few £100s for a small local load-it-yourself job, up to well over £1,000 for a bigger home. If it's a longer distance or a full packaging service where they box everything for you, that's going to cost a bit more. Get your quotes early, especially if you're moving on a Friday or at the end of the month, because that's when everybody moves and prices climb. There is a reason I tell people to time their move for a random Wednesday in the middle of the month. And then there's the little cluster of costs that never make it to the official list but always turn up. You've got mail redirection with Royal Mail, so your post follows you. It's a modest cost but worthwhile. Storage if there's a gap between moving out and moving in. New white goods or furniture because the fridge that fitted perfectly in the old house absolutely will not fit the new one. Time off work for the move, and the classic overlap, a bit of double running where you're paying for 2 places at once, especially first-time buyers coming out of rental. None of these are enormous costs individually, but together they are easily several £100, and they're the ones that blow a tight budget because you didn't see them coming. Now this one's quick, but it's important. I've done a whole separate video on this, so go and have a look at that, and I'll keep it short here. What we're talking about is buildings insurance. The moment you exchange contracts, not the moment you move in. That house is legally your risk. So your buildings cover needs to start at exchange or a week or two before you get the keys. Most lenders insist on it anyway, because the house is their security too. Leave it to completion day and you've got an expensive gap where a burst pipe is entirely your problem. And contents insurance for your actual belongings is worth having in place for the move itself, because moving day is about the easiest day there is to break or lose something valuable. It's a small cost. It's also a cheap bit that saves you from the catastrophic bit later. So don't treat insurance as an afterthought. So let me try and pull all this together with a rough worked example so you can see the shape of a real all-in number. These are completely illustrative numbers. Your actual figures are going to differ, but the point is the total, not the pennies. So say you're a home mover buying a fairly typical price home. On top of your deposit, you might be looking at stamp duty, and that depends entirely on your price and your situation. Go check it on the Gov UK calculator. But on a mid-range home, it's frequently the biggest line after the deposit. Conveyancing on the purchase, possibly around £1,500 to £1,800 with the disbursements. A survey, call it £500 or £600. Then there's the mortgage arrangement fee, anywhere from £0 to £1,500 depending on the deal. A broker fee for your mortgage. And then because you're selling as well, you've got an estate agent fee of a few thousand. An EPC and a second lot of conveyancing for the sale. Removals, several hundred to over 1,000, and the forgotten extras, another few hundred. Add all of that up for a typical home mover, and you're very often looking at several £1,000s. And on a pricier property with a big stamp duty bill, you're well into five figures. And that's entirely separate from the deposit and the house price itself. Now, that's not meant to scare you. It's meant to make sure you're not caught out, because the people who struggle aren't the ones who budgeted for this. They're the ones who found out one fee at a time. So what do you actually do with all this? Well, simple. Before you fall in love with a house, sit down and build your own version of this list with real numbers for your situation. Get your stamp duty from the gov.uk calculator. Get 2 or 3 conveyancing quotes, get a removals quote, add a sensible buffer on top because something always costs a bit more than expected. That number, the all-in number, is your real budget, and knowing it changes everything. You stop overstretching, you stop getting nasty surprises, and you can move with confidence instead of dread. And that's genuinely where a good advisor earns their fee. My job isn't just to find you a mortgage. It's to look at the whole picture with you. The rate, the fees, the timing, the costs you didn't know were coming, and make sure the numbers actually work before you commit, not after. I'd far rather have an honest budgeting conversation with you at the start than watch you get halfway in and hit a wall. So if you're planning a move this summer or later this year and you want a proper honest run through of your own numbers, that's exactly what I'm here for. Message me, drop me a comment, or hit the links in my bio, and let's build your real budget together before the fun bit turns into the stressful bit. I'm Patrick Waitman, your local East Midlands mortgage and protection advisor, serving clients up and down the UK. Drop me a like and a follow for more, and hit the links in my bio to get in touch. Just a quick note before I go, your home may be repossessed if you do not keep up repayments on your mortgage. Speak to you soon. Bye-bye.